Ah, she's here. We can begin. Hello and welcome to another Kata.
He's back! That's right, and I'm back. And we're back at Bringing the Thunder with another exciting Kata. You can probably guess from the guest, it's going to be about low-code apps.
Exactly.
How would I know? How did I know? But you're always welcome here, and it's always great because you teach me and us so many new things. Now, it's a bit silly of me to have to ask this, but in case people are watching for the very first time, who are you and what do you do at Skyline Communications?
Yes, so I am still Sebastian Dummeling, still the product owner of Data Exploration, the domain that is working on all of these visual frameworks, focusing on dashboards, on low-code apps, on GUI, and on the visual overview.
Yeah.
And today, I've created a session on low-code apps again,
Okay.
focusing on input controls and on feeds.
Input controls and feeds. Okay. Interesting, because I'm not really sure what they are. So
Okay, good.
hopefully I will walk away here knowing exactly what to do with them.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've prepared another kata, an exercise?
Yes, exactly. And this kata is also going to build further upon the previous kata that we did. I think it was 7 or 8, kata number 7 or 8.
Yeah, could be.
Where we are creating an IP address management app. And now we are going to use feeds and input controls in that.
That was the one with the tower icon.
Yes, exactly. So we still have our EPAM app available here on our screen. So let's select it and let's have a look at what we have right now. So our current state is that we have an app with 2 pages, one that is listing all of the IPs and one that is listing the subnets. Now, all of this is rather static. Let's make it a bit more dynamic. And more dynamic, I mean, how can the user fill in some values and you can use those values to do a number of actions.
Okay.
Have you ever worked with the visual overview?
The video, or like Visio?
Yes.
Yes. I
Yeah, so there you have a concept that is session variables where you can store a value in a session variable.
Yes.
Well, we have the same concept.
And then reuse that in different parts.
Exactly.
Okay.
But we have the same thing in dashboards and low-code apps, and we call that feeds because we have controls that are feeding certain values to other controls or components.
Okay.
Okay. So let's have a look on how we can configure that. So
Okay.
let's edit our app by going to the user menu, pressing edit. We did all of that before. And let's go to our subnets page.
Okay, and if someone doesn't have this yet, they can look back at the kata to do it,
Yes,
or is there an import that they can do of
No,
something?
no.
Okay, so just have a look at the previous kata. It should be relatively easy to just catch
We
up.
have a data set available and you can list the subnets in a table and basically you're good to go for this kata.
Okay.
Okay, so we can edit our page, and when editing a page, let me close the side menu. At the bottom you have basic controls.
Yes.
And we want to use these basic controls to have a better filtering experience of our subnets. So imagine that I want to filter my subnet table based on some criteria.
Yeah.
So you can actually already do that. So let me show you.
So an input box where you...
Yes, so that's what we are going to do, but I'm going to show you what you can do with the table on itself.
Oh yeah, the table has it built in maybe.
Yes, exactly. So you can actually right-click on a column and say filter, and does contain VLAN 1, and if I hit apply, you see that my table filters. But all of this is a bit...
Well, this is a filtering within the editor.
No, it's also available when you're just using the app as is.
Ah, okay.
Yes, yes,
so not just because within the editor you can do that.
That's available on every table, basically.
Great. Okay.
But this is a bit hidden, tucked away. So let's make it more visible with some input controls, maybe.
Okay.
So let me remove this filter. Going to restructure my page a bit. So we're going to use a text input. So at the bottom under basic controls, you have text input.
Just a small text box.
You drag that on there and you see that a text box is appearing. Now, this is just a text box and you can actually type in there. But we want to perhaps first style this a bit, inform the user what this text box is about.
Yes.
And for that, we have some nice layout settings. So if you go to the layout tab, you can actually give your input box a label. So if I say VLAN filter, you see that a label is being added
At the top
to the
there.
top.
Yeah.
You can also say, okay, we want to actually make this label in line so it's next to each other. Or you can actually not do both and use a placeholder, which is basically going to put a watermark in your input
Inside.
to indicate what this
Right.
input control is doing. Additionally, you can also add an icon. We're going to do some filtering, so a filter icon is applicable here. All right.
Yep.
We now have configured our input control. I think it looks good. Let's have a look perhaps. Okay, VLAN filter, I can type in there. If I do VLAN 1,
Yeah.
it doesn't really do anything, right? Because we haven't told
You haven't
the app.
attached an event or an action to it?
We're not using the feed that it is exposing.
Right. Okay. That's the part you're going to need to explain
Yes.
to me, because
Exactly.
I jumped to events and actions because that's what you showed in the past.
Yes, exactly.
This is the feed that will direct that input to be used
Yes.
in your table. So,
And I'm glad that you bring it up because those are the three main concepts of low-code apps. You have events, and events trigger actions, and then you also have feeds. Feeds are values that are exposed in some way or another, and are always available. For instance, if I type in VLAN 1, that value is there to stay, while an event is something that triggers once and then triggers actions, basically.
is there a change, like I know with events and actions, that you sometimes need to do an additional action to fetch data to get the new views? Do you need to do that as well with feeds, or is that...
No. That's where feeds are actually pushed based. So if a new value is fed, queries can execute automatically again.
It happens.
Yes,
Okay.
it happens automatically, basically.
It just works.
It's just words, which is good. All right. So we have our inputs.
Okay.
Let's leverage that input. And before I apply it on a table, I'm going to showcase it by actually using another text input. So we have another text input. Let me add that here.
And you're going to link that.
Yes, exactly. So I'm going to link my feed from the one text input to the other to show you when something is actually fed.
Right.
So if I go to feeds on the right-hand side, I have my text input 4, which is the left one. Selected, yes, text input 4. And you see if I open that up, it says value, and as a value, it has strings. So in our case, it will only be one value, but you can actually drag that on there. And let's have a look how this behaves. So I've linked my left text box to my right text box, and I can type in here, and I say VLAN, and it doesn't appear up until I hit enter.
Okay. And you did that by drag and drop? Did I see that right?
Yes, I did. I went a bit fast, but basically...
Well, I should have been paying attention. Yeah.
So indeed, I went to the feeds on the right-hand side. I drag and drop it as data on my text inputs. Now, this is updating, not on every character press, but when I'm hitting enter or when I type and it loses focus. But you can actually change this behavior.
I was going to ask, you bring it up because you can probably configure it, right?
Yes, you can configure it. So in the settings, you can actually say, when does a value need to be fed? So on enter, on focus lost, and on value change. And if we actually enable the last one and we start typing, you see that the left one is actually on every character press getting the value and displaying it. So this is the main concept. You have a control that is providing a feed to something else, and then the other component can actually use that feed in some way or another.
Not to get too technical,
Yes.
but just out of interest, where is that stored? Like that memory, is that volatile memory? Like if if your data miner goes down while you were doing that and goes back up, is it going to be clear?
Yes, so this is indeed all happening in the memory of the browser. This is a user session, and all of this is happening
completely
in JavaScript. It's basically fully JavaScript. Yes.
Okay,
Exactly.
Okay, right. So
if you want to have persistence or something else, we need to be looking at ad hoc data sources that will provide that back to the client.
Right, yeah.
So now we have our value, but actually we want to use this value on our table.
Indeed, we want to filter that column.
Exactly. So let's remove our duplicate text inputs.
Drag and drop. Are we going to drag and drop?
No, we're not going to drag and drop. We're going to hover over the component, and then you have a recycle bin in there.
Okay, yeah. I meant for the next part.
For the query.
The query, yeah.
Okay, let's have a look. So if I select my table, you actually see data used in component. This is using the subnets query.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to duplicate the query. That's actually a new feature in 10.4.1. If you don't have it, you can actually create the query from scratch.
Handy.
Yes, so we can duplicate that, or perhaps call it subnets with filters. And we are now going to extend our query with the filter operator. So we have seen GQI, and GQI exposes ways to filter data. So we can say filter. I want to filter my VLAN name. It should contain something. And now we have the possibility to enter a static value.
Yes.
Or on the right-hand side, there is an icon that says.
Does it say?
Does it say something? It doesn't say anything.
But there's an icon.
Yes. Okay.
Maybe
it should say link to feeds.
It should say link to feed. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you know the icon is there, you can click it.
Yeah, and this icon is actually popping up in several places. So whenever you see that chain icon, you know I'm going to chain this to...
The chain icon indicates a feed or some kind of connection.
Exactly.
Okay.
So if I click that icon, I get a picker that says I want to link this to a feed, which means this value is not static. No, it's coming from a feed. I'm going to leverage a feed.
Yeah.
And here...
That variable, volatile variable.
Yes, exactly. And here you can now pick which value that actually is. And this pop-up is actually listing all of the controls in our low-code app. So every control that is exposing a text value can be used in this case. So in our current view, we have text input 4, which is this control.
Right. Okay.
And then we can select that, and it will automatically fill in the rest. So it says it's of type string, and we're going to use the value.
So I was joking a bit, but just to be clear, so there is no, you cannot, like you did with the field box, drag the feed in there. That's not part of this. You need to use the picker to get it done.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because if you drag and drop that text input on your table, then the table needs to know that you want to filter on a certain column. It should be a contains.
Yes. Okay.
We should do a lot of estimated guesses, which is always dangerously. So in this case, it's the user that say, I'm going to leverage the feed in this way.
Makes sense. You need to be able to pick which column and what you want to actually filter and do with that value.
Yes.
Okay. Makes sense.
Okay. And then at the bottom, we have another selector that says, when my feed is empty, how should I behave?
A default behavior.
Yes. Okay, and there we have 3 options, nothing, empty, and everything. Let me show you what nothing is, and I'm going to show you by example because that will be the most clear.
Yeah.
Before
I can think of 2 options that could happen. Yeah. And it'd be good to see which one it is.
Before we continue, let me also update our table so it's using the new query instead of the old one. There. If we now preview our app, we get this. And we get an empty table because in our query we said when our filter is empty, we don't want to see anything. So we don't get any results up until we say we filter.
Okay, so that's the empty in the picker does not refer to making the value empty. It refers to your query result being empty.
No, it means to, it points to the feed being empty. So if I don't have a feed value, how should my query behave? Should it show all values or should it show no values?
Yeah, so the end behavior of the query, what you're doing there, that's what you mean with the default behavior. Is it empty or...
Yes, exactly.
Then everything is probably going to show the entire table until you start filtering.
Let's do that. So indeed, if I now have no value, I get nothing.
Okay. Yeah, so there were 2 options there. Either it's about the value being empty or the end.
Exactly.
but so it's the end result. Good.
That's the end result. Also note that the value that you see here, the nothing to show, is also completely configurable. I think it's in the layout. So when I don't have any results, you could say no subnets found or something like that. You could make that, tweak that message a bit
Right,
more.
so it makes it clear. Okay,
Yes, exactly.
use the filter box or use the search to.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. But we were going to tweak our query, so instead of showing nothing, it should show everything instead. So we can go back to our picker and now say everything. And now when it's empty, it shows everything. So now if I open it, I see everything and I can still filter. So
Yeah.
this is a good question for everybody creating a low-code app, because you need to think, do I want to have filter behavior, meaning I have everything and then I'm going to reduce
it,
or do I want to have more of a search behavior? I have nothing up until I provide a search term.
right.
Perhaps for searching in log files, you actually want to do searching, while in other cases you want to do filtering. It's something that you can choose.
And is there a change in efficiency and performance? Like if you pick that it's empty in the beginning and you just say, okay, to
Yeah.
find something,
No,
search.
That's a
that
great
be-
question. If you say, I don't want to have any results up until I provide a value,
Okay.
yeah, that's going to be very fast, because it's not executing any queries in the
Yeah.
background. It's just saying, no, I'm waiting up
That's
until
why
you-
I'm asking. I was hoping it wouldn't.
Yes,
so,
yes,
yeah,
yes. So
it's
indeed, if you say, I don't want to see anything
until you search,
until you search, it's not doing any queries. So that's
more performance.
more performant.
So
of
if you're
course,
dealing
yeah.
with a lot of data, that might be the more performant approach.
Yeah. Okay, so this is for a text value.
Okay.
Let's do the same thing again for a numeric, because we have a VLAN ID in there as well. And we actually have another input control that is handling numerics. So if we go back to our basic controls, we have a numeric input,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to do the same thing again. So let me make sure that these are next to each other.
And you do need to use the right type. So
Yes.
using the string on an integer.
No, that's a good question. So everything in GQI is working based on value types.
Right.
A column is indicating I'm containing some text, or
Strongly typed.
it's all strongly typed, but it's data agnostic. So we don't know what the data is. It's just looking at the types, basically,
Right.
just like a database.
Okay.
So our numeric input, let's style this as well. So this is going to be a VLAN ID filter. I want to have the filter space icon in there as well. And in my settings, since it's a numeric, you can provide some additional configuration for this input. For instance, we want a step size of 1. We want to have no decimals because it's an ID. It starts at 0 and the maximum is 999.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
So similar to how we configured the text filter, we now have a numeric input, and we can now use this input again in our query. So if we go to the subnet with filters, we have get the data, filter on the VLAN name. If there is no filter, get everything. And now we're going to chain another filter to it, this time on the VLAN ID.
Oh, so we're filtering both then.
Yes,
Okay.
we are filtering both, but if one of the two doesn't have any value configured, it's just going to return all the values, and we basically delegate the filtering to the other
Okay.
input.
So it's not really an or. It's not really an and.
It's an AND. It is an AND.
It is an and, but if the first one's empty,
Yes.
it ignores. Okay. Get it.
And we're going to greater than or equals. And now this time again, we're going to link to a feed, but now we're going to use the numeric input, and you can see that the text input is not there because we filtered it down based on the value type once again. So now we are expecting a numeric, so you will only see numeric things in here. So when we do that, if the feed is empty, we want to see everything, and we can now take a look at the end result. So we now can input a numeric. So if I'm doing 990, we see that the list is filtering, and now we can also say VLAN1 So you can actually create all of these controls to create a UI that is suitable to your
Yeah, nicely filtered your data, showing only what you want to see at which point. Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is a use case where we have input controls, and these input controls are providing feeds. But now we are going to take a look at how existing components can also provide feeds. For instance, our table.
Okay.
Okay.
So the table itself is going to provide a feed.
Yes, exactly. And you can take a look at the feeds. So in our current view, we have a table, and we see that the selected rows are also exposed as a feed.
Yes.
Do note that we currently have a limitation in our app framework that you need to select the row before it is added to the feed section. So if you don't see the table on the right-hand side, select the row, and then you will see it popping up on the right-hand side.
And you can then probably use that to do things like with your selection, things like removal, editing it.
So let's have a look. Perhaps we want to take a look at a subnet. List all of the IPs that are also using that subnet.
Sure. Yes.
Okay.
Makes sense.
I want to show that information in an intuitive way. So perhaps let's create a panel to show that information.
Okay.
So panels can be created on the left-hand side. We can add one and call it subnet details. And let's add our table to the top of this page. If we now drag our table, our selected rows on this component, you'll see that the information that we have selected in our table becomes available
in a new table.
So we are actually pushing all of these rows from one table to another, and no data retrieval is happening in the process because we have everything in the client.
So client side
is actually feeding it to this new component, and it's actually not limited to one row. So if I select multiple rows, you see that you can actually push multiple rows to this panel. Okay. So
now we're seeing the data that's selected.
Yes, but we actually wanted to see the subnets that are using the IPs that are using the same subnet. Okay, so how can we do that? Well, let's create another query. So I'm going to duplicate the subnets query once again. This duplication, but I'm starting to love it.
Yes.
We have just introduced it, and I'm a big fan.
Already used it a few times, so good. Very valuable addition.
And then we are going to say, okay, I'm going to filter it, my data set. I'm going to filter on the subnet mask. I'm going to do an equals, and again, my value is coming from a feed. So I'm hitting that icon that says link to feed.
Right.
Okay. Then on my table, I see...
This is not changing the table we have there. This is making a new...
This is just making a query. How we visualize that query
is that query you'll add in a component or use...
Indeed, exactly.
I get it. Okay.
Yes. You see that we have our table available in our picker. It's under subnets because this table is located in the subnets page. So we can select that. You get the query rows as a type, and then you still need to specify, which column from this row do you want to use as a filter, because this query rows is actually containing all of the values of that row. So we need to pick a certain column. So we see that our column is called subnet mask. So we can actually start typing, and you see that it auto completes to subnet mask.
Yeah. Just to ask, so the feed that we're using, is it the feed that created this table, or is it this feed that this table creates?
No, it's the original feed that is selected.
So not doing a feed from a feed?
No, although that is possible.
Is that performant? Or
no, that's all happening in the client. I'm not worrying about performance in this case.
Okay, so if you had picked the feed that this one creates, in theory,
that should also work.
but you'd still need to select.
You would then still need to select something, and as a user, that's not that intuitive.
Yes,
Select something
yes.
first, then select something again.
Right, I understand. So, okay, based on the first feed,
Yes, so this one is based on the first
it
feed.
makes more sense.
All right, and now we can actually visualize this in a new.
Right, a new component that...
Yeah, let us take a table here once again. All right, so we now have a panel that is showing the information based on selection of our table.
Yes.
But we can't forget that panels are not shown by default. So let's make sure that this panel is popping up whenever we double click on a subnet over here. And we can do that by going to our table, go to the settings, and actually in there you have an on double click event.
Is there an on right click as well? Like, could you say right click?
That's something that's on the background.
I've asked one of those questions again.
Yeah.
It's good. That means it's...
But do note that in a later kata, I believe you will see how to make a very nice table template, and in there you'll see that you can have icons and context menus and all of that. So that's another approach that is definitely doable.
Okay, but in this case, so double click.
This case, double click. So the
panels.
event is double click. What needs to happen? Open a panel. That's right. The subnet details. Let's pick something on the right. Doesn't matter that much. Give it a width and say OK. And if we now take a look at the end result, we can now, for instance, take an IP with subnet mask 128 at the end. If I double click on it, it's opening a panel on the right hand side. We see that our originally selected row is at the top, and then we have all of the IPs that are actually using that subnet mask.
Right. So you're getting more information from the table filtered based on a GQI query created with the feeds that you get from all the tables. So that's pretty good, actually. Yeah, it allows...
This allows you to create very dynamic apps where users can select certain things, and then you actually take that context to another panel or page, and then continue the workflow, basically, because this is the start of a workflow. I select a subnet, I'm going to look at what is connected to that subnet, and then
go through there, make some...
Perhaps launch some automation scripts in here to rebalance IPs and all of that.
Yeah, it's quite a powerful tool to be able to do that.
Definitely. There's a lot to be said on feeds and on every component that is actually exposing feeds. I'm going to stick with this for this kata.
It's good.
And I suggest as an exercise, you can actually create two screenshots. One where you have filtered twice in this table, and the second one where you actually have this
panel with user feeds. Okay, well, you heard it. So if you can take those screenshots and send them in, we'll get you some DevOps points for that. Sebastian, thank you once again for making
my pleasure.
Time. It was actually really interesting. I didn't know about feeds, and now I do. And I hope everyone watching does as well. If you are watching from YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. Ring that notification bell so you're always aware of our new katas whenever they come out. And other than that, I wish you all the best, and I'll catch you later.